It's almost a cliche to say that in America, we build cities around cars instead of people. Well, cliches usually get traction because they're true, but today I'm taking you to a US city that turns all of that on its head. It's a literal 15-minute city where it would be nearly impossible to live more than a brisk walk from anything you need. They've been re-engineering their streets in clever ways to eliminate traffic deaths. And if you need ways to get into the big city next door without having to drive, well, they've got you covered there too. The city I'm talking about is Hoboken, New Jersey, and let me set the context first. It's a municipality across the Hudson River from the Chelsea/West Village part of Manhattan. Now, I won't be offended if you think, isn't there a word for a smaller municipality that exists just outside a large central municipality? And I'm not going to police your vocabulary, but just know that people who live in Hudson County, New Jersey do not think of themselves as suburbanites. So I'm not going to get caught up in semantics today, but the regional context is important. And maybe more important is the fact that Hoboken is a city of 57,000 and change that exists on a little over 1 square mile of land. And in fact, Mile Square City is one of the nicknames it goes by. But that means Hoboken has a population density that is nearly twice as high as New York City. And I'm not giving you stats trivia just for fun. Density is a huge reason why it's so special. When you think of dense urban environments, you might think of high-rises, but there's very little in Hoboken that's taller than 5 stories. It's just that the stuff that's 3 to 5 stories is everywhere and built right up to the sidewalk. And that kind of density not only supports, but necessitates lots and lots of storefront commercial. It's actually hard to say Hoboken has a downtown. The area around the old Lackawanna terminal, which I will come back to, probably has more impressive massing than the rest of the city, but not by much. Just to reinforce how important this is, let's compare another US city of about 57,000, Winter Haven, Florida. If you want to know why Winter Haven, or basically any other US city of 57,000 people, doesn't have the same smart, walkable, mixed-use urbanism that Hoboken has, I don't know if you need much more explanation than that they use like 30 times as much land area to house the same number of people. In a way, density is destiny. If there's a main street in Hoboken, it's Washington Street. Just one travel lane in each direction, and it carries a lot of buses to the terminal at the south end of the corridor. And it carries a lot of bikes too. Not my favorite kind of bike facility, but because of the street designs that you're going to see throughout the city, Hoboken is pretty solid for biking, which I think is evidenced by the number of bikes locked up near the rail and bus station. But also, City Bike has stations all over the city, including right on Washington, wide sidewalks, recently improved pedestrian crossings with natural stormwater features, lots of restaurants and commercial, bagels recommended by noted bagel expert Frank Sinatra, interpretive signage to let you know about key moments in the city's cultural history, and no matter where you are in Hoboken, you're always going to be a 15-minute walk max from Washington Street. For that matter, everything in Hoboken is basically a 15-minute walk or less from the riverfront too, and the riverfront is fantastic. Wide pedestrian promenade, 2-way off-street bike path that'll get you to and from the terminal. And it's a cliche to say it, but the cliche is true. The best views of New York aren't from New York, they're from Hudson County, New Jersey. The city does have its own peculiar iconography, from the stylized H that adorns the PATH station and public fixtures all over the city to strong ties to Italian heritage, including some great old storefronts that are still going strong all over the city, as well as the city's identification with the origins of what I think we can still call the national pastime. Okay, let's get to the actual reason I came to Hoboken, which is that the city has not seen a traffic death since 2017. I kind of hesitate to cite this statistic, not because I'm superstitious and I think I personally am going to jinx it, but because when this fatality-free run inevitably ends, I don't want the lessons in this video to feel any less relevant. Nevertheless, it's worth contrasting Hoboken's record on this metric with Winter Haven, Florida. Again, same population, and a quick news search will leave you with the impression that traffic fatalities are a weekly occurrence. Now, Hoboken's traffic safety record isn't spotless by any means. There are still serious injuries that happen, but I want to spend a bit of time highlighting things the city has been doing to improve safety. And it starts with recognizing that people who are walking or biking and are involved in crashes are much more likely to be injured or killed than someone who's inside a car. And I'm going to focus on infrastructure in this video since things like education and enforcement, while they are important, aren't visually compelling, but I'll leave a link to the city's entire Vision Zero plan down in the description. So as we talk through these, I want to direct you to PedSafe, linked below, which is kind of a clearinghouse of pedestrian safety resources, including countermeasures. First, we've got a raised crosswalk along 5th Street, just north of Stevens Park. These are ramped speed tables spanning the entire width of the roadway, usually placed mid-block and demarcated with paint and/or special paving materials. The idea here is that the vertical deflection is going to reduce vehicle speeds on approach and make pedestrians more prominent in the driver's field of vision, all of which improves motorist yielding compliance and reduces pedestrian crashes. In general, high visibility crosswalks are a big part of the city's plan, so you'll run into fluorescent yellow-green from time to time, reminding drivers what the actual law is, just in case they're in the mood to comply. School speed zones, also with high-vis colors. By the way, Hoboken also has some vintage 80s looking drug-free zone signs. I'm not encouraging anything here, but I gotta believe these would go for a princely sum on eBay. Another thing Hoboken has done, they've taken a lot of what were two-way stop control intersections, which means the minor street has stop signs and the major street doesn't, and converted them to all-way stop, which usually reduces the level of service for drivers by introducing more delay on the major approach, but it reduces crashes. Here's another resource for you, the Crash Modification Factors Clearinghouse, which is your one-stop shop for finding research and evaluation of all kinds of safety countermeasures. The CMF Clearinghouse will guide you to the paper, Estimate of the Safety Effect of Always Stop Control Conversion in Washington, D.C., which finds an overall 36% reduction in all crashes and a 42% reduction in injury crashes associated with converting intersections from two-way to all-way stop control. You guys, Hoboken is getting it done. The city has managed to go a little nutty with curb extensions, which are great. They reduce crossing distances for and improve visibility of pedestrians, and the tight radii slow vehicle turning speeds. Some of these have been done in conjunction with natural stormwater treatments, which is understandable since Hoboken is at extremely low elevation. The city has undertaken bigger land reclamation projects related to stormwater. This is Resilience City Park, which is hard to say, but interesting to visit. The park doesn't even show up in aerials because it's so new, and it gives you a sense of what Hoboken is doing with street rebuilds when they get a chance to do them. The sidewalk frontages are like bioswale heaven, lots of new street fixtures, and Hoboken is the unofficial birthplace of baseball, so a little batting practice in January, why not? This is expensive infrastructure though, and I am a fan of quick build projects. Stuff you can get done cheap and fast that makes a difference. For the same cost of a couple proper curb extensions, you can buy hundreds of gallons of beige paint and a few hundred delineators, and just go crazy all over your city, reclaiming street space and shortening pedestrian crossings. The big thing I want to talk about here though is daylighting intersections. Now, in Hoboken, like a lot of US cities, it's illegal to park within X feet of an intersection and has been for a long time, but drivers will do it anyway since the area usually isn't demarcated at all, and it's basically never enforced. You may find this shocking, but drivers don't actually obey traffic laws unless they're made to, which is evidenced by the fact that if you have the temerity to drive at the posted speed on basically any roadway anywhere in this country, you will be tailgated, honked at, passed aggressively, or probably worse. Anyway, the city does a great job of demarcating these areas, and there are locations where it seems like they simply ran out of delineators, or maybe they just gave up on installing them because delivery trucks are just going to do what delivery trucks are going to do. But Hoboken has a crap ton of intersections that have good delineation on all four legs. Make no mistake, they identified the worst ones as part of their Vision Zero analysis, and I find these kinds of crossings just extremely comfortable to navigate as a pedestrian. It's a short crossing distance, it's a narrow envelope for cars to navigate, the daylighting is going to make you extremely visible to drivers as you're walking, and assuming delineators, it's going to slow vehicle turning speeds, similar to a curb extension, but at a fraction of the cost. So at this point, one thing you might say is all these intersection treatments and infrastructure fixes are fine, but the real reason Hoboken hasn't seen a traffic fatality since 2017 is, just look at the streets. This is an old city that was laid out before the advent of the automobile. There are barely any streets that have more than one lane. There aren't any freeways or real stroads in Hoboken. And I guess my response to that is, yes, precisely. One way to look at this is, Hoboken is an outlier, but the other way to look at it is, this is what cities should look like, and if more of our cities looked and functioned like this, our nation would have a tiny fraction of its current traffic fatality numbers. Just to give you an idea, this is 14th and Willow, which I think is the biggest and busiest intersection in Hoboken, and the most challenging to cross for a pedestrian. And here's a typical major intersection in Winter Haven, Florida. Again, same population. And the argument you'll often hear is, look, you urbanist pinhead, being able to walk to everything you need in your city in 15 minutes without dying or experiencing life-altering injuries. Well, that's all well and good, but if people really wanted to live in places like that, there would be more of them. To which I'd just point out that prevailing housing prices in Hoboken are multiples of what they are in Winter Haven, and they're going in opposite directions. So if your idea is that people will only live in dense urban environments if the government forces them to, I strongly encourage you to learn about basic concepts of supply and demand and how prices respond to those things. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to get to some more extremely cool things about Hoboken. Like, you didn't really think I wasn't going to talk about trains, did you? And all the usual ways to connect, links down in the description. If I remember right, the Hunter College folks used LinkedIn to get in touch and eventually bribe me to come out. So thanks to them for sticking their necks out, and thanks to the War on Cars for sharing the stage with me. We had a sellout crowd, and I think we raised over $25,000 for Hunter's scholarship fund. New York was a blast, and I hope to do more of these kinds of events in the future. So one thing I have to be upfront about, usually when I visit a city, I do some kind of city visit video, but I just don't have the hubris to try to do a 25-minute video that attempts to encompass all my thoughts about New York. So every time I come here, I'm going to try to focus in on a particular geography or issue that really captures my imagination. And one of those issues has to be congestion pricing, which will have been in effect for over a month by the time this video gets released. There's kind of a glut of videos about congestion pricing on YouTube right now, so I just want to make clear that if you live in Hoboken and you're driving into Manhattan in the first place, you probably need professional help because there's no shortage of ways to make that trip that don't involve driving a car. Now, I'm assured by this interpretive mural on a utility box along Washington Street that the PATH train, originally the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad, was America's first subway, but I could swear subways began operating in New York in 1904. So somebody please explain this to me down in the comments. In any case, the PATH is old enough to where it apparently needs to shut down for a whole month for maintenance, so I guess I got here just in time. Anyway, when it's running, you can take it across the Hudson and up into Midtown Manhattan, or take a different train south into the financial district. So as long as it isn't February 2025, the PATH has you covered for trips into the big city. Even if it is February 2025 though, the New Jersey Transit bus terminal is located right next to the PATH station, and Route 126 to the Port Authority in Midtown runs every 3 to 10 minutes, depending on time of day, and with the congestion charge in effect, I'm hearing those trips, which have a 24-minute scheduled trip time, are faster and more reliable right now than they've been in a very long time. But let's say you're a transportation snob and the humble bus and the Port Authority terminal are just way too lowbrow for you. Worry not, the New York Waterway Ferry Service has you covered with trips leaving from the Hoboken Terminal docks, right next to the PATH and the bus station. You could honestly reinvent your commute every day of the week in Hoboken. And bonus, there's a second ferry slip at the north end of town at the 14th Street Pier. Is the ferry just a slow gadget bond for people who like a little scenery on their trip into Midtown? I don't know, I'm guessing this one is pretty efficient if you live on the north side of town and you want to go to Hudson Yards and take selfies with an extremely large pigeon. And apparently they're having capacity issues at this dock, so draw your own conclusions. For trips elsewhere in the wider metro area, there is the old Lackawanna station, which is gorgeous in my opinion and also co-located with all the other transportation options. And Hoboken doesn't show up in census data as having a high bike commute mode share, but it's pretty clear that tons of people bike to the station, even in January, to the point where they installed wayfinding to help you find all the parking spots, because the demand is insane. Like, I don't even know what's happening at this city bike station right next to the terminal, but I'm mentally filing it under capacity issues. It does seem like a theme. People in Hoboken really value transportation options that don't involve driving. And a tour of Hoboken Transit is not complete without Hudson Bergen Light Rail, which runs from North Bergen all the way through Jersey City and down to Bayonne. Not co-located at the terminal. It runs along the backside of Hoboken, just under the Palisades of Jersey City, and there's what I assume was a very expensive elevator to get all the way up and down. By the way, I did get to Jersey City on this trip, and I had ambitions of shoehorning it into a larger video on New Jersey urbanism, but Jersey City is a whole other thing altogether, so I'm gonna have to come back for that one. So even with this wealth of transit options, you've probably noticed in the shots of the street environment I took all over the city, there's on-street parking on nearly every block face, and it was very rare to see an empty spot. There's even, gasp, a parking structure a couple blocks away from the downtown terminal. But the census numbers are eye-opening. Fewer than 1 in 5 Hoboken residents drive to work, and 86% of workers live in a household with 1 car or fewer. Again, Winter Haven, Florida, also population 57,000, is a pretty instructive comparison. This is kind of a choose your fighter situation, and I'm just saying we need a lot more Hobokens so people can afford housing in places where they can walk, bike, and take transit everywhere. It's better for your health, it's better for your sanity. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's better for the planet, and you might save $9. I'm just saying, living in New Jersey and driving into Manhattan is a choice. Probably not a very good one. And with what you pay for parking, a $9 congestion charge should be the least of your concerns. But worry not, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is here to defend your honor as the drama around New York City's new congestion reduction program continues to unfold. And today's sponsor, Ground News, really helps me understand the full range of ways that the program is being received. Ground News is a website and app designed to make reading the news easier and more data-driven. Every day, they collect thousands of articles from all over the world and arrange them by story, complete with visual breakdowns of the reporting bias, reliability, and ownership, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. They even give you summaries to help you understand how these biases may influence framing. So Governor Murphy, a Democrat by the way, has apparently asked the incoming US president to quote-unquote re-examine congestion pricing. We can see over 30 different news sources reporting on it, with 35% coming from left-leaning news organizations and the rest coming from the center. Has the New York Post really not got a hold of this one yet? The variety of framings is still instructive though. I love the Jalopnik headline. New Jersey governor begs Trump to force New York to let residents drive into city for free. Well, yes, the whole thing is pretty insane when you put it like that. Anyway, what makes Ground News great is you can easily browse through all these different perspectives and framings, draw your own conclusions, and be entertained along the way. Because I'm definitely someone who likes to look at different perspectives on a story. Not because I'm looking for some theoretical middle ground, but just because I like to know what people on different parts of the political spectrum are talking about and how they're talking about it. So a part of the app I really like is the blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. Because there are some important topics that apparently just don't get discussed enough in left-leaning media, like, for example, White House releases first new official portrait of First Lady Melania Trump. You do wonder why earth-shattering stuff like this isn't all over the front page of the New York Times. Anyway, if you're looking for a way to get outside your own echo chamber and see what's going on in a completely different echo chamber, Ground News' blind spot feature is for you. So Ground News is a great tool for sifting through the misinformation and bias that seem to pass for news these days, and I can't recommend it enough. In fact, they're currently offering 40% off their Vantage subscription, which is what I use for unlimited access to all their great features, including Blind Spot. You can only access this discount using my link, so go to ground.news/CityNerd, use the link down in the description, or use the QR code here on the screen, and support an independent news platform that's working to make the media landscape more transparent. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and as always, thanks to the patrons whose direct support really smooths things out for me. It means I don't have to worry about cash flow if I want to take a week off to go do an event out of town or, I don't know, work on writing a book. The flexibility is super important, and I just can't do everything I do without your direct support, so a sincere thanks. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks because I have more travel on the docket, but I will see you then.